lot of things had gone wrong, but we forgot it all when we saw the Grand Teton mountain range shooting up in front of us.
You're listening to Travel FOMO, a podcast for people self-diagnosed with wanderlust.
Welcome to our newest season of the Travel FOMO podcast. We are here talking about how we adapted to RV life. It was not a quick adoption, guys, but we're going to take you through the chaos. I am Hillary Houghton, and I am here with my husband, Jamin, who took me all over the U.S. and Canada, and I definitely would not have experienced it this way if I hadn't had this guy in the front seat beside me making it happen.
A lot of miles.
So many miles. And Jamin drove them all. When we talk about hauling the RV, Jamin did it all. Do we know how many miles we put on it?
It was, by the time it was all said and done, like 40,000 miles.
40,000 miles in 9 months, maybe? 6 months more so?
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, we're going to take you all through it, but in this episode specifically, we are talking about arriving at the Grand Tetons. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. It's lovely.
It was really, really striking. I mean, when you first drive up to it, it's maybe one of the most dramatic entrances to a national park. I feel like there are others where you like come around a bend and something is like crazy right there for you, or like other things like that. But when you come up to the Tetons, especially coming like we were from the east, so we were on the east side coming in, and they just shoot up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's so flat, and you're just on these plains, and then you just see them, and they're there, and they're just so dominant.
Yeah.
And they're so dramatic too, and like they're just jagged and so tall. It is just breathtaking how you just come up to them, and they're so recognizable. If you've seen images of them, if you've been there and then you see pictures, you're like, that's the Grand Tetons.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
I feel like a lot of other places you might say like, oh, that looks like this or it looks like that, but I feel like for us and what we saw, the Grand Tetons and specific mountains in Yosemite are the most recognizable of like that. I know exactly where that is.
Yeah. And our friends, the Nelsons, actually pointed it out to us and were the reason that was the first place that we ended up. They had been there before, loved it, and kept talking about how incredible it was. And so we were like, okay, you're going to return. We want to go with you and see this place that you love and learn about it. And so that's kind of how we got there. And then we were going to head on. We really wanted to see Glacier too. And they also really wanted to see Glacier, and so we kind of ended up getting to do both of that with them. It was incredible.
It was so cool. We went for a run with Maggie on our very first morning.
That was lovely.
Yeah, and like the Tetons are right there. You're just staring at them the whole time that you're on a run. It was really cool. We had a lot of trouble getting that far.
Oh my gosh.
If you didn't listen to the last episode, a lot of drama there. So if you like hearing a big sob story about how difficult it is when you're not that smart and you're in an RV, you can do that on our last episode. And we were having a tough time, but the Nelsons were having a little tough time too. Like they weren't feeling well. They had to go into Jackson to get some medicine and kind of get checked out. But
it was hard for them too.
It was a difficult first day.
We were all kind of like, dang.
Like what did we decide to do? We should have just gone on a cruise or something.
Yeah, exactly. But on our first day that we actually got to really go on adventures, we went to String Lake, and it was probably, when it was all said and done, it was probably my favorite adventure that we went on in Grand Teton National Park. It's beautiful. It's relatively shallow, and like there are these green waters and blue waters and like a skinny little lake. I loved it. I thought that was really, really neat. I would have loved to really spend a whole day there, but we found out there were bears. So I was like on edge. You guys, the bear thing can cause real anxiety for people. And I am definitely one of those people. It got a lot better over time, but it took a lot of repeated hikes for me to eventually kind of get comfortable with the idea that it's not likely. I do have bear spray. I'll probably be fine. Probably won't die. Sometimes people do. I probably won't.
Well, but, it played a big part in us choosing to do RV over tent camping.
True.
I mean, there were a lot of factors, but a big one for you
that's right.
was like having something hard-sided to sleep in.
I totally forgot that was a big deal because we started watching more and more national park videos. And the more we researched, the more I realized, like, oh my goodness, we are truly going into real bear country.
Yeah.
And Night of the Grizzlies, guys. I saw that. You're going to hear more about it in the next episode on Glacier National Park. Holy cow. But yeah, there's so I was still anxious about hiking. I say still. It was really the beginning. It was only the beginning.
Yeah. You remained anxious about bears and hiking for quite a while.
Yeah.
As everyone will discover.
Yeah, as y'all see. And in this instance, I'd forgotten my bear spray too. So I was like so annoyed with myself. I was also literally taking Xanax every time we went on a hike. Which is true. It is true. It's kind of crazy. But that night, what else happened that day? Was that the day we also went back and saw that there was like a bear sign that was like a grizzly had just been seen? Oh, we came back or something and like somebody had said, oh, you just got off that trail? They just saw a grizzly on that trail.
Yeah, you and I went back to hike it with little further, spray. Like another side of it. Yeah. And someone was like, oh, there's a grizzly right down there, and you wanted to leave right away.
We were done. Yeah. But a storm actually was coming in too, so it was all meant to be. We're supposed to wrap it up for the day. But the other thing that I thought was so cool was one of the nights that we were there with the Nelsons, we had dinner with them at a place called Dornan's, which is a really cool restaurant actually.
Yeah.
With incredible views of the mountains.
Amazing views.
Great food. Beer, like what's not to like? I think we had pizza, which was
pizza
legit.
And beer and views of the Tetons.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. I can't imagine getting to see an actual storm roll in from there. I mean, these massive windows. I think there's even a deck where you can sit outside. It was just really like definitely a place I would recommend spending one of your evenings in the Grand Tetons, especially if you just you've been camping and you kind of need an itch for somebody to take care of you.
And someone else to cook the food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just go to Dornan's. But yeah, it was pretty incredible to watch the sunset. Watching the sunset in the Grand Tetons is so unique because it sets behind the mountains and you just see the mountains. It's just like they're shining at you.
Yeah.
And the sun is just like these sunbeams are just shooting out on all sides of the really steep mountains. It's pretty cool. So at one point we went back into the park because we were kind of in an RV campground that was just outside the park, just to the east. And so there was one point where you and I and Maggie went in to see a little bit more of the park, and we got to see Mormon Row, which is something that is some really recognizable little old homes, like a little tiny like street kind of old homes and barns that have the Grand Tetons right behind them, and it's just pretty iconic. Place where people come and take photos, and so we got to check that out. We also drove up Signal Mountain Summit. It's a place with really good views. It's if you kind of need to rest and you still want to see some of the park, that's an idea, is to just, take a drive up there and see it. You might get a signal. That's what I decided once we got at the top. I was like, oh, I have a cell phone signal. Maybe that's why they call it Signal Mountain Summit.
I think that maybe it had that name slightly before cell phones.
Maybe.
And perhaps there were other signals that were involved. But
yeah. But we did a lot of fishing while we were there. I say we. our friend did a lot of fishing while we were there, and we were always just kind of hanging out and getting to relax by rivers and things like that, which I thought was really fun.
Yeah.
And it kind of took us, I think, to little places that we would not have gone otherwise, which I appreciate that about traveling with other people, is that they pull you in directions that you wouldn't necessarily go yourself, but then that allows you to see or do something you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah, and I think fishing, even if you're not super into fishing, I think just like going down and being by a river and making yourself stay still for a while.
Very hard to do.
Is really cool and a really great idea in a national park. I remember like Maggie getting those bites all over her. Do you remember that?
Yes. They were like blood red.
Yeah, these gnat bites. And at first we didn't know what they were. We thought, is she having some kind of allergic reaction to something? Are they tick bites?
Yes.
Or are they like ringworms, or like what is happening? And we ended up doing some research and finding out that they were fly or gnat bites. And it's not really a problem. Like they look a lot worse than they are, but there was really tall grass kind of all around the campground, and the mosquitoes were really bad. In fact, the campground would like spray once a week. And so there were signs up everywhere, and I forget what day, but it was like, hey, just reminder, Tuesdays, like we come through with the fogger, try to kill out the mosquitoes. But that was like a shock. And with all the stuff that had gone wrong so far, we were like, what's happening now? Like, what's going on with Maggie? There's something up. But it ended up not being a big deal. They were just gnat bites, but just another kind of crazy thing that you just don't know about till it's there on top of you.
I know. Yeah, that was crazy. I remember one of these days we went to Jenny Lake with the Nelsons, and that was super fun. I really like the Jenny Lake area.
Yeah.
I think they had also implanted really wonderful images in my head, and we'd seen a lot of their pictures before, so I was like, oh my goodness, it's beautiful. But it was really fun to get to go there with them. But then also one thing along the way that was like a little surprise, we had like some time to kill. I think they had to run back to the campsite for something, and we have some time to kill, and we stopped at this little chapel. I never knew this about national parks, that they have little chapels and churches inside national parks, and kind of that national parks operate almost as their own little country or state in a way. It's kind of interesting. Like they, to some degree, have like their own world, you know?
Yeah.
And so in churches are part of that. And so the Sacred Heart Chapel is a chapel there. So if you happen to be driving by and stop in there, it was a little creepy because nobody was in there. But also, like, I don't know, something about it just struck me as like special. And it was just the first one that I'd seen inside of a national park. And I remember it really sticking out to me and really noticing them moving forward too. It was cool.
Yeah. That was really interesting and something kind of unexpected. I really liked Jenny Lake too. I thought it was amazing. We went, and you can hike kind of all around it, and you can also take a boat across it and hike on the other side. It's a massive lake, and you can go all the way around and be quite a hike, but you can take this boat across and hike. And so we decided to do that. It was a nominal fee to do it, but really a lot of fun because you get to see it from the water. You get to kind of be on a boat. There's not really anything on the other side. Like there's a little dock where the boat drops you off, but there's nothing over there. There's no like bathrooms over there, or like, so don't expect that you're gonna like find a sandwich shop or something on the other side. It's literally just trailheads. But we got to hike. We hiked to Hidden Falls. And to Inspiration Point. I didn't realize how great all the hiking was at the Grand Tetons, because it was kind of our first stop.
True.
But now that we've been to a ton of national parks, the Grand Tetons offers a lot of like stuff that's really interesting right off the bat. And there's a lot of places where you have to hike quite a bit to get to the interesting parts.
Good point.
And the Grand Tetons is not that way. Like the String Lake is really interesting all the way through. These hikes that we did around Jenny Lake were really cool. Hidden Falls is right there. Inspiration Point is not that hard to hike from where the boat drops you off, and is breathtaking once you get up to it. It's just a really cool park in that way. And being there with the Nelsons was a lot of fun. They had their little boy Charlie. He was only 3, so
I know he was a little tight.
Can't do a ton, but he was a trooper. Like he would hike around. They ended up stopping at a certain point because he had kind of reached his limit of as far as he needed to go, and you and I continued on up the trail a little ways, and there was just a lot of really cool stuff along these rivers and just breathtaking scenery kind of everywhere.
Yeah, we were hiking through Cascade Canyon at that point, and I was really surprised by how the vegetation kept changing so much throughout this hike.
Yeah.
We had you're starting out with the lake, and then you've got the deep forest and the streams and the rocky areas, and anyway, and incredible views, and then you end up in tons of really tall grass in Cascade Canyon, falling rocks. I remember you wouldn't know there'd be animals up there, but then you'd hear rocks falling, and you're and you look up and be oh, because there's an animal up there. That's crazy. Do you remember meeting that father and daughter that were hiking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were coming in from doing a really long hike. They'd been out in it for days.
Yeah.
I think they'd gone 30 miles, and I think it'd taken them 4 or 5 days. And so they were, just camping and hiking. And
I was so impressed.
I remember wanting to ask you in front of them if you would ever do that, because I could just tell how shocked you were that they were out there camping with all the bears.
Yeah.
And
I mean, to me, the physical endurance of it, I'm yeah, sign me up. I'm all about that extreme stuff. Even though I'm not terribly athletic, I am interested in seeing how I can push my body.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of sleeping with the bears, I'm just no, there's not even a little part of me that wants to do that, because I won't sleep at all.
Yeah.
I will be so thoroughly exhausted,
It is cool to see national parks and how you can get involved to kind of whatever level you need to experience and still have fun. For us, we were with our friends the Nelsons, and they've got their little boy Charlie with them, so they didn't go as far as we did, and we weren't going to go stay 5 nights out in it.
No.
But national parks kind of offer that varying level of intensity in a lot of places, and I think that's why a lot of people like them. Well, that's why a lot of people think they're really cool. And the Tetons was definitely one that has that of if you have mobility issues or stuff like that, there are drives that you can go on that are breathtaking and amazing. If you can't make it very far, but you still want to hike some, you can see some great stuff from not that intense, and you can really get after it if you really love going on long hikes and being out in it. There's so much there. It's such a cool park.
Or want to do some mountain climbing or
absolutely,
horseback riding or something. There's a lot of options. One of the things that people love doing when they're at Grand Tetons National Park is also going into Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Yeah.
Such a cool little city.
It is, and it really kind of gives you I feel like Jackson Hole feeds into the personality of Grand Tetons.
Oh yeah.
Because it's got this really sort of Western vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you tie that in with Mormon Row and the old barns and the fact that there's so many bison and elk there, it really has this really ranch and Wild West sort of vibe to it. And I feel like Jackson just cranks that up to a 10.
It really does.
And just makes the Tetons that much more interesting. And it's a really cool place to go, with tons of little restaurants and stuff like that, and shops and all the kind of things that you want. But it really, sort of like feeds that personality of the park. They really go hand in hand very well together, I feel like.
Yeah. So, yeah, you mentioned restaurants, and one of the places that we went to was Mary Piglet's Mexican restaurant, and that was fun. It was just like it was fun to go into Jackson Hole at all, and to go shopping, and, you know, lots of little boutiques and very sporty little places too, where you can like get your gear and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Which is kind of fun. But the thing that really sticks out to me about Jackson Hole and Grand Tetons is the story of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. So I'd been following that quite a bit the year before.
Yeah.
I think it was like the October before. It would have been October 2021. And this Mary Piglet's Mexican restaurant was the last place that people remember seeing Gabby and Brian together. And for those of you who didn't follow it as closely as I did and become as obsessed as I did, like I was following it in real time. Like as soon as I heard about this girl on TV, I'm looking up her Instagram, and I am already like detecting things in the Instagram that I'm like, that's so weird. Why would she post that? That doesn't make any sense. Lo and behold, we find out later that Gabby actually was killed by Brian. He was on her social media account posting those things. Crazy dramatic story, but very sad story too. Very sad ending. And her body was later found in the Grand Teton National Forest, which is just on the east side of the national park. And I know that I feel like it impacted people a lot, because you're talking about these van lifers, you know.
Yeah.
Van life and RV life had become a really big thing during COVID. Camping in general, hiking, national parks, the whole outdoor space had become such a love for everyone. Mm-hmm. And then you have this couple that something goes wrong, right? The relationship goes wrong. Somebody does something just horrible, and it's just so unbelievable. And so many people, I feel like, could relate to it at that time, because they were like, I was just camping the other day too, or I've been there, or I'm going there.
Yeah.
And everybody's been experiencing these national parks, and then to see just to see that story unfold, I think everyone felt really close to it. At least I did. I talked about it a lot, didn't I?
You did talk about it a lot, and I think it gripped people a lot too, because people imagined, and a lot of people portray, that van life or RV life is just this amazing thing.
Good point.
Where there's never a bad day, and you're just enjoying all these national parks, and you're just having fun all the time, and there's never anything bad. And so seeing this story play out and go like, oh, whoa, like not only were there problems, there were huge, major problems.
Yeah.
And I think that like really opened a lot of people's eyes to maybe what was being kind of misportrayed a lot about like van life or RV life, and really kind of like turned a light on to a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of opens your eyes too to the idea that like when you're traveling like that, when you're traveling like we have, you're in such close proximity to the other person that if you are really having consistent arguments, and maybe your relationship isn't mature enough to handle it.
Yeah.
You are forced to be together, and you're so dependent upon each other for your livelihood that there's no place to go to cool off. I mean, in some ways you could say you have the great outdoors, which is great. But in my case, I would never go venture out because I'd be afraid of bears or something. So I would never do that. So it's kind of interesting, like understanding that paradox of like, you have all the space in the world, but you have no space.
Right.
It's kind of interesting.
And there's a lot of work that has to go into van life and RV life and those kind of things, like work with things that you don't necessarily think of, like where are we going to be today? What's the particulars around that? Do we have electricity? Do we have water? All those kinds of things that you're not ordinarily having to deal with. And so it's a lot of work. It's all very doable. It's not hard, but it takes a lot of doing.
A lot of decisions, and you get decision fatigue really easily.
and a lot of stuff that like has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just, if you're having a bad day or having an argument or whatever, you can't just go to your own corners and let time go.
Mm-hmm.
Like all that stuff has to continue to happen. And so you really have to start to learn how to work stuff out in real time.
Yeah.
And yeah, being in that tight, confined space can be taxing.
Yeah.
Can be pretty crazy.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think, whenever you think of the Grand Tetons and your like overall thoughts, if you had to explain the Grand Tetons to somebody and hopefully help them understand how it's different from other places,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say to them?
I think the mountain range itself is just so iconic.
Yeah.
And so recognizable and so ever present there. Like you're always looking at it. I feel like there are other national parks where there's like a main thing and you go and you see the main thing or you do it, but then the rest of your time it's not really present. But the mountain range is just so iconic, so present. There's so much stuff to do
Mm-hmm.
at the Grand Tetons, like with the lakes and all that stuff. You've got all of the things that go along with that: the boating, kayaking, paddleboarding, swimming, fishing, all of that. So I feel like it's a very active park, along with hiking and all the other stuff as well. It's easy to access. It's also not
Yeah.
a super huge park,
Yeah.
so you can get around it.
Yeah.
And you can be like, I want to see this, and then I want to go over there and see that. Where in some other parks that are just so big,
Yeah.
that it's like you're only going to see one thing in a day because you've got to drive all the way to it, see it, and then by the time you drive back, you're done.
Good point.
And the Tetons is not that way. Like you can get around it. You can get into Jackson Hole, and that afternoon still go to Jenny Lake, and all of that kind of stuff. I think makes it unique. The cowboy ranch vibes also are a pretty unique thing to it. And I really, really liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I liked the Tetons a lot. People are really friendly there. I feel like you can converse with pretty much anybody, and they're gonna be nice and happy. The bison along the road is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Really big elk too, like seeing
Yeah.
all that stuff is just really pretty special in the grand scheme of things, to have all of it in such close proximity and all of it to be so dramatic.
Yeah.
And so just all encompassing. Like it's a really special place.
Yeah, it really is. And I feel like I've been told or read, don't take me on my word for this, you should like definitely fact check me, but I'm pretty sure the mountain range is pretty young, like relatively young compared to a lot of other mountain ranges in America. And that's why it's so steep and sharp. And I think that's really interesting, because then if you were to go, I believe it's the Smoky Mountains that are just these nice rolling rounded mountains that have been around much longer. And I just think that's fascinating. You were talking about all those different things that people like to do in the Grand Tetons, and one of those activities are climbing those mountains, those really steep mountain ranges. And while we were there, actually before we were there, we were driving and we were listening to a podcast episode about the Grand Tetons. It was part of the National Park After Dark podcast. And we just started listening to them some because we were kind of now trying to get familiar with national parks, you know, after Europe was checked off the list. And we were kind of getting a kick out of them too. And this particular episode just blew my mind. And after this, I was like, I have to read that book. So when we ended up at the Grand Tetons, I bought the book. And the book is A Bolt from the Blue. It's by Jennifer Woodleaf, and it goes back to July 2003. And it tells a true story of 6 mountain climbers who were climbing the peak of the Grand Teton Mountain. And, you know, you've got this mountain range, but there is actually one mountain within all of those that's called the Grand Teton. And every summer there are thunderstorms that are pretty standard in the mountain range. And you might not experience them down below, but like there's a lot happening up there in the mountains. And so an electrical charge was building up in one of these thunderstorms that day. And this group of 6 people realized they had to come down. And so they were starting to retreat, and there was a lightning bolt that struck, and it went through every climber because they were all attached to the same rope. And one of them died instantly. Her husband actually was right there beside her, critically injured, and just right there next to her body the whole time. There was 4 others just dangling from ropes. I mean, it was really, really tragic. And the really heroic part of this story are the Jenny Lake Rangers. In terms of like rescuing people who are mountain climbing, this is like the top of the top. This is just crazy. And the team themselves are so experienced at search and rescue, and it's the best of the best that they hire to do it. And I didn't know all of this about them, but when you hear it, it's just like, wow, that's a whole nother world I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And so these rangers, they come out, some of them run up by foot, and they get it done. What takes people hours and hours to climb, they do it on foot, I believe without ropes and everything, in like 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy. And some of them arrived by helicopter, but both of those were crazy dangerous, both routes they were taking to get to people. Believe it or not, the people on foot arrived first, which blows my mind as well.
Yeah, that's just insane.
Can you imagine like how fit these rangers are? And then someone comes by helicopter, and they're hanging, like there's storms happening. They are hanging by a rope, and they are trying to get to these people and save them. And the whole story, it's riveting. It is gruesome. It is terrifying, and I can't believe it's true. It's crazy. Yeah. It's really crazy. It's definitely one of history's, I think they call it one of history's most dangerous mountain rescues ever. But it is definitely worth reading. It is called A Bolt from the Blue. It's by Jennifer Woodleaf. It's a true story. It makes me want to go look up like interviews with these people on YouTube and hear from the survivors and the rangers. It's fascinating, but I love knowing that there are the Jenny Lake Rangers out there.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I feel so safe.
It is cool that they've got that like elite squad of people.
Yeah.
There that are there to save people when they get in a bad situation.
Yeah.
And that they're so good at it. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
We actually headed out from the Grand Tetons because it was only the first stop on our adventure.
That's right.
We were headed to Glacier National Park, and to go from the Tetons to Glacier, we actually carved through Yellowstone, and we were starting out, and it was early in the morning, and we had seen some elk and some bison in Grand Teton, and we'd heard about people seeing bears. We didn't see any ourselves, but we're kind of getting in this whole national park kick, and so wanting to see stuff. We were hoping to see some moose and some things, and we're driving, and it's early in the morning, so animals are pretty active like in the evenings and the morning. And Hillary is like, oh my gosh, look at that, and she just sees this huge thing coming down the mountain, and I'm driving, and so I'm trying to like look over, and I was like, what is it? Yeah, you were like, it is moving so fast. It's just incredible. It's what is that?
Like a werewolf or something.
And so I look over, and I was like, do you mean like right there, like at the bottom of that mountain, going past that tree right now? And she's like, yes. What is that? That thing is huge. What is going on? And I was like, that's a car. They tend to be fast. And when they move, they are huge. Like they're big compared to animals.
That's hilarious.
It's a car.
It was like a black car or something, or like some kind of dark car.
Yeah, it's like a black car.
Yeah, and I was like, oh,
just fired up and on edge.
I really wanted to see a moose, and I was like, I don't think moose can move that fast. Like, I just thought it must be this huge bear or something. I don't know. Oh man, what was your reaction to Yellowstone?
I mean, I was surprised at at how beautiful it was.
Yeah.
Especially it was early in the morning when we were going through, and I really like wish that we had gotten to spend more time.
It felt very classic. Like I was like, oh, this does feel like the classic movies you see about people in a park.
Right.
Camping.
Yeah. headed to a park. We did get to stop and see Old Faithful and kind of like hike around on they've got a sort of like a deck built, like an elevated trail that you get to hike through the geysers. And we got to see a lot of that, which was just kind of mind blowing. Having heard about it and read about it, you can kind of absorb it a little bit. But I can't imagine if I had never heard of a geyser or never heard of like those geothermic phenomenon that are there, and you just taken me and put me out there, I'd have been like, what is this?
Yeah.
This is insane. Like I don't understand what I'm seeing. I don't understand what I'm smelling.
Yeah.
You know, this like sulfur smell, and it's chilly, but there's all this really hot water everywhere and these crazy colors, and what's going on? Like it was wild, and we were only there for like an hour.
Yeah.
Like we hiked around a little bit and watched Old Faithful go off, and we had to hit the road. But I thought it was pretty incredible, pretty special, and one that I want to go back to and really do it justice and see it.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that is so interesting about Yellowstone is how it's like basically a giant volcano underneath it.
Just waiting to erupt.
Yeah, like whoa, that's really dramatic.
Yes.
And none of us seem to really be bothered by that, which is crazy.
Yeah. That was one of those things when you realize the magnitude of it, and like if it does erupt, like the area of the United States that will be impacted, you're like, wow, and we're all just hanging out.
Nobody, well, clearly you can tell there's nothing anybody can do about it. Therefore, everybody just quit talking about it.
Yeah.
It's like kind of crazy, I guess.
Yeah, it really is.
That's crazy. And then since we've driven through it, I have read the book Deaths in Yellowstone. Whoa. It's crazy. I mean, it tells the stories of all different ways that people have died in Yellowstone. And some of them are typical. I think people would be surprised how many deaths happen in the winter. Over the years. And but then also these geysers are incredibly dangerous. And there are a ton of really sad stories of people falling in this hot water. And including, there's a reason why they don't let your animals, your pets, get outside. You can't take them outside the vehicle at places like Old Faithful because they could get loose and they could be so hurt running into some of this water. Yeah. And I say water, it's basically boiling water. They have boardwalks for people to walk on, but they're not, there's not a lot of rails to keep people from falling in. Yeah. And I'm really surprised by that because, man, it's crazy. But then you also have to think about it as, these geysers are all over the park, and there's no way they could put up rails all over the park. So they just have to keep educating people. You've got to be careful. You've got to be careful. It
was a travel day, so of course something had to go wrong, and we left Yellowstone.
That becomes the common theme you will hear every time there's a travel day. Something goes wrong.
Yeah, it was a pretty consistent thing through most of our travels. But we finally, we get on the road from Yellowstone. We're all excited because we've seen it, and we're headed to Glacier. Our water problems are fixed. Life is grand. And the check engine light comes on in the truck, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, and we're pulling a trailer, and so it's just like, well, what do we even do? We stopped in a little place called Ennis, Montana, and fortunately there was an auto parts store there, and a very nice gentleman who worked there who came out and ran the codes for us to see why the check engine light had come on, it turns out that it was a glow plug issue, and fortunately he was nice enough to tell us that like it wasn't something that we really needed to worry that much about. And so we were kind of able to get on the road, but with this like odd feeling of like, man, I hope that everything's gonna stay okay, even though we feel like maybe it's not. But we were able to get back on the road. Fortunately, the truck was running fine, but we did have the check engine light, and it was just one of those things that we were like, man, we can't get away from this.
Mm-hmm.
But we did end up making it to Glacier, which was another crazy great time.
Oh my goodness, so good. Next episode, can't wait to tell you all about Glacier National Park. Definitely one of my favorites. It is so diverse.
Yeah.
The amount of landscape, the variety of landscape that you get to see. The stories from Glacier National Park are so great. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. There's so much special about Glacier National Park.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. There's so many things that are just incredible about it. Definitely glad we went. I feel like it's one that's so remote that not a lot of people get to go.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it's worth it. Like it was really cool.
Yeah, so good. So be sure to subscribe on YouTube and subscribe wherever you're listening to podcasts. Just a reminder, we have videos that come out with every podcast, so be sure to check them out on YouTube. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, TikTok. We are out there doing the short videos and doing all the things. And we will share shorts from our time in these national parks as well. We intentionally made sure to capture footage that would be great for people on their smartphones. So be sure to check things out from that perspective. You can find us at Travel FOMO Podcast on all of the platforms.
You can also reach us at travelfomopodcast@gmail.com. That's our email address. And if you have some tips and tricks for the Grand Tetons or RVing in general, maybe some stuff that you did while you were there or your favorite national park, we'd love to hear all about that. And we'd love to share it.
Yeah.
So if you will just send us an email, we'll be happy to read it here and share it with the Travel FOMO family. Or if you'd like to share it yourself, feel free to record a voice memo and email that to us. And we'll take that as your permission to plug it here on the podcast. And in your own words, you can share the stuff that you know with the Travel FOMO family so that we can all get a little bit better at traveling.
That's right. Oh my goodness. Can't wait to hear what you know so we can learn from you. You guys, life is short.
Wander well.